Assalamu alaikum, dear students. So here we are, where we are going to start your book with Unit 1. This is talking about yourself. Dear students, there are many situations in life where you need to talk about yourself. You may be appearing for job interviews. You may be appearing for interviews at universities where you may have to talk about yourself. Whenever you meet some person for the first time, the first thing you do is you introduce yourself. So in so many situations, we need to introduce ourselves. And at the same time, if we are accompanying another person who is new to the person we are meeting, we need to introduce that person too. So in this unit, you are going to learn how is it that you talk about yourself or you talk about other people who are around you. As I told you, introducing yourself is very, very important. It's an important skill. There are certain things that you talk about when you introduce yourself, and there are other things that you may not mention while doing so. Similarly, every situation will need some different information about you that you need to tell. You must have noticed that so many times when you fill certain forms, you talk about yourself, you introduce yourself. But then all the forms do not require you to give similar information. Let us see what are some of the things that you need to know in the case you want to talk about yourself. This unit is going to introduce to you what words and sentence structures you use for this purpose. Now, the first thing that you can talk about yourself is your name. Your name gives you that particular identity that differentiates you from other people. So whenever you introduce yourself to somebody at a certain place, maybe a classroom or a job or anywhere where you're new, you introduce yourself with your name. We all have individual different names that kind of give us our identity. They tell us who we are. Now, after giving your name, sometimes you need to talk about your age. You need to tell people how old you are. So when you talk about your age, you speak about your age in years. It is interesting to note that there are situations where you may be required to give particular information, specific information about your age. For example, while visiting a doctor, you may even need to tell how old exactly you are. I mean, how many years you are old and how many months after that. Similarly, when you're applying for a job, they sometimes want you to tell your age in years, months, and days, because the job requires people with certain age to apply for that job. So even a difference of a day or two can make difference to your age in such cases. Then, in many forms at many job interviews, you need to give your address. Now, there are two kinds of addresses that you must have seen in certain forms. There is a permanent address and there is a present address. Your permanent address is the one that is written on your identity card, and this is the place where you belong to. Even if you are living temporarily at some other place, this is the place where you and your family belong. This is an important information about you, because you may be changing and shifting homes, you may be shifting cities, but your permanent address remains the same. So, your permanent address is needed in case a document needs to reach you while people cannot approach your present address. On the other hand, your present address is the one where you are currently residing. जहाँ आप उस वक्त रह रहे हैं, वो आपका present address है. Present address change हो सकता है. आप जब भी कहीं रह रहे हो तो आपका प्रेजेंट एड्रेस उसी जगह का होगा, लेकिन परमानेंट एड्रेस वो एड्रेस है जिस शहर या गांव से आपका ताल्लुक है, और आपकी फैमिली का ताल्लुक है. Then your educational qualification. So many situations need us to talk about our educational qualifications. One thing that you need to note here is that whenever you talk about your educational qualification, you start with the latest degree you have done. आपने जो भी पढ़ाई आखिरी की है उसके बारे में आप बात करेंगे. अगर आपने मास्टर्स किया है तो आप सबसे पहले अपनी मास्टर्स की क्वालिफिकेशन से स्टार्ट करेंगे. Again, it is important to note that there are certain places where your final qualification will do, and there are other places that require you to talk about your qualifications before that. कुछ ऐसी जगह होंगी जहां आप सिर्फ अपनी लेटेस्ट डिग्री ही बता देंगे तो वही बहुत होगा, जबकि दूसरी जगहों पर आपको लेटेस्ट डिग्री से पहले किए जाने वाले सर्टिफिकेट्स और डिग्रीज का जिक्र भी करना पड़ेगा. आपकी एजुकेशनल क्वालिफिकेशन टेल्स पीपल what specialty or what subject specialty do you have? किस फील्ड में आपके एक्सपर्टीज हैं? Similarly, when you talk about yourself, you also talk about your job details, the kind of work you have done or the kind of work you usually do or the kind of work you know how to do. So, you talk about the latest job that you have done or the current job you are doing. While introducing yourself, you may not be talking about all the jobs you have done so far. But then again, there may be situations like job interviews, or there may be employers who would like to know all the other jobs that you have done. So it is important that whenever you talk about your job or your work, you talk about the current work you are doing. जो काम आप presently कर रहे हैं, जो job आप इस वक्त कर रहे हैं, आप उस job का जिक्र करेंगे. Unless you are asked about those other jobs that you have previously done. इसके साथ ही आपकी इंट्रोडक्शन में when you talk about yourself, आपके likes और dislikes भी आते हैं. We have so many likes. For example, you can talk about the colors you like. You can talk about the seasons you like. You can talk about places you like. And similarly, you can talk about places or colors or dishes that you do not like. So our likes and dislikes also tell people who we are. What are the things that we would like to do? What are the situations which will be welcome to us? And what are other situations that will kind of upset you? So again, when you talk about yourself, you need to introduce the other person according to the situation you are in. For example, at a job interview, you may not need to tell people about your likes and dislikes unless you are asked to do so. So, while writing about yourself or while introducing yourself, you have to keep in mind the occasion that demands you to talk about yourself. Now, this is very important that you should know how to put a question to someone. Because when people will ask you to introduce yourself and when they would want you to talk about yourself, so many times they will be putting questions to you. There are mainly two types of questions. One type of questions are called WH questions. WH questions are the questions that start with this list of words that you can see on the screen. The questions that start with words like what, where, who, whose, when, why, which. These are the questions that are, all the questions that start with these words are called WH questions. On the other hand, we have certain questions that start with helping verbs. There are questions that start with do, does or did. There are other questions that start with auxiliary verbs like is, are, was, were, can, could and so on. So this unit introduces you to WH questions. You will see many exercises in the unit that talk about how to construct WH questions and how to answer them. Because this is a kind of introducing yourself that needs you to know answers to these questions. Or even if you want to know somebody else, you would like to put these questions to them. अगर आप किसी और शख्स को जानना चाहते हैं और चाहते हैं कि आपको अपने बारे में बताए, तो आप उससे कुछ questions करेंगे. Like you may ask him, what is your name? Now this is a WH question. Similarly, if you ask that person, what do you do? You are asking them about the kind of work they are doing, about their job. Similarly, if you say, where do you live? You want to know their present address. If you ask them, where do you belong to? You are asking them about their permanent address. So this is how you put WH questions to people to get to know them. Let us see in the next slide, how is it that you construct a WH question? What is the correct structure of a WH question? And similarly, we will see how is it that we answer a WH question. There is something very technical about WH questions. Let us see what is that. Whenever you construct WH questions, you see that the helping verb comes right after the WH question word. Like for example, when I say, what is your name? I use is directly after what. I cannot say what your name is. So that would not be a correct construction of a WH question. So always keep this in mind that WH questions are constructed in a certain fashion. To help you with WH questions, I have given you a formula to construct the questions that start with WH words. The construction says, you give WH question words, after that you give the helping verb, after that you give the subject of the sentence, and you end the sentence either with a verb, a noun, or a preposition. I have given you 3 examples for each one of these down here. Where do you live? Now, where is a WH question. Do here serves the purpose of a helping verb. You is the subject of the sentence and live is the verb. In the next sentence, what is your name? What is a WH question word? Is the helping verb. Your here serves the purpose of the subject and name is a noun. If you come to the last question in the list, you see, where are you from? Now this question is ending at a preposition and the rest of the construction is exactly the same. This is how you construct a direct WH question. Also notice that the WH questions end at a question mark. So many times students make this mistake of ending a question with a full stop. Questions always require to be finished at question marks. Similarly, I'm repeating myself to make you remember that questions, WH question words, are always followed by helping verbs. Helping verbs do not follow the subject in the case of a question. Now we'll see how is it that we answer WH question words. Because so many times, for example, in job interviews or in meetings where you're meeting somebody for the first time and when somebody wants to know about you, maybe they are putting some questions to you that you need to answer. For example, they may ask you, where do you live? What is your name? Where are you from? So you need to answer them. Now, what is the construction of the answers that are given to WH questions? Now, if you look at the answer starts with the subject, I. Then follows the helping verb. Since this is a sentence in present indefinite, there needs not be a separate helping verb. So we use the main verb as the verb itself. And we say, I live in, and then Sahiwal is the answer to where. So this is how you construct answers to WH questions. The formula is, you start with the subject, you use the helping verb, and then you answer the WH question word. In this question, where do you live? Where was the WH question word, which we answered with Sahiwal. The next question was, what is your name? Now, my name, that is the subject, comes in the beginning. It starts the sentence. Then comes the helping verb, that is, and then comes the answer to what. Answer to what in the question is John. So the answer to what is your name is, my name is John. Then comes the last question, where are you from? Now here, the sentence, the answer again starts with the subject. I. Then comes the helping verb am, from, and then is given the answer to WH question word. The WH question word in this question was where. So, Bahawalpur is the answer to that where. So, this is how you construct WH question words, and this is how you give the answers to them. There are exercises in your unit that will give you more practice into not only constructing WH questions, but also in answering them. Always remember to use these constructions while you are trying to be introduced to somebody whom you haven't met before, or while you are introducing yourself, you can use these answers. Now, on many forms that you have filled, whether for educational purposes or for job purposes, or maybe in years to come, there will be forms that you will be filling in. For example, you might be applying for receiving a license, or you might be applying to get an identity card and they give you a form to fill in. There are many fields on a form that you need to know and you need to fill, and these are, you can say, very important to be filled in case you want to get the thing done. Now, what are some of the things that are there on such forms? There's your name. While you write your name, you must have seen that many forms say that after asking about your name, in many forms they have written in brackets in block letters. In block letter means you need to write your name in capital letters, and that means that you write all your name, I mean the whole spellings of your name, all the letters in your name in capital letters. Now that is very important because that reduces any risk of your name being misspelled. So, whenever you write your name on a form or you type it somewhere, in the case of applying for something, it is always desirable to write your name in block letters, in capital letters. Then comes gender. Gender defines whether you are male or female. Are you a boy who is applying or a girl who is applying? Then there is your father's or your guardian's name. In case you do not have a father and you have a guardian, you give their name. Similarly, CNIC, that is computerized national identity card number, if you already have an identity card, you give that number here. Then there is your nationality. Now, your nationality is the country you belong to. If you belong to Pakistan, you will write Pakistani. That is your nationality. If you have any other nationality, you also mention that too. So, nationality basically, it denotes the country you belong to, and you can claim nationality of a country if you have the citizenship card, like our identity card in case of Pakistan. If you have that card or that tells that you are the citizen of that country, then you say that I am a national of that country. Then comes your place of birth. Now, place of birth is the place where you were born. And again, it requires a document to say that you were born, like your birth certificate that tells that you were born in a certain city or a certain country. Again, there is date of birth. Now, when you give your date of birth, it is very important that you are following a certain standard way of writing a date. Always remember that in many countries, there are different ways of writing a date. For example, there are countries where the month comes in the beginning and the date follows. Similarly, there are other countries where date comes in the beginning and the month follows. So, you must have noticed that while filling forms, whether you are filling them manually or you are filling them online, you must have seen that they have given you small blocks for writing your date of birth. And in those small blocks, they have mentioned Y for the year, M for the month, and D for the date. So, you have to follow the given pattern. For D, you will write the date, in M, you will write the month of your birth, and in Y, you will write the year of your birth. Then sometimes they ask you about your native city. Your native city is the city where you belong to. For example, you may be living in Lahore, but if you belong to, let's say you belong to Bahawalpur, then that is your native city. If it is here that your extended family lives, that is your native city. Then sometimes they may ask you about your mother tongue. Your mother tongue is the language that your father, your mother, or their parents speak in the part of the country where you live. Mostly, mother tongue is the first language that the children learn, that little infants, because they hear that language around them. So you may be very good Urdu speaker, but it may be so that Pashto is your mother tongue. Similarly, your education and your job experience. We have talked about them before, but again, I'll repeat that whenever you write about your educational qualification or your job experience, you always start with the latest degree or the latest work that you have done. By latest, I mean कि जो आखिरी काम या जो आखिरी डिग्री आपने की है, आप उसके साथ शुरू करते हैं. आप अपनी आखिरी डिग्री को सबसे पहले लिखते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर आपने मास्टर्स किया है, तो आप मास्टर्स को सबसे पहले लिखेंगे, उसके बाद बैचलर्स, उसके बाद इंटरमीडिएट और फिर मैट्रिक. यू डू नॉट स्टार्ट अदरवाइज. ऐसा नहीं है कि आप मैट्रिक से स्टार्ट करके मास्टर्स तक जाएंगे. इसी तरह जॉब एक्सपीरियंस भी है. जो काम आपने सबसे आखिर में किया है उसको सबसे पहले लिखेंगे और फिर पीछे की तरफ जाएंगे. Then comes your residential address. Your residential address is the same as the present address that we have already talked about. रेजिडेंशियल एड्रेस के लिए या प्रेजेंट एड्रेस के लिए आपको कई टर्म्स मिलेंगे. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, किसी फॉर्म में आपको रेजिडेंशियल एड्रेस कहा जा सकता है, किसी में आपको प्रेजेंट एड्रेस कहा जा सकता है, किसी में आपको करंट एड्रेस कहा जा सकता है और किसी में आपको पोस्टल एड्रेस कहा जा सकता है. Postal address, of course, mostly is the current address, is the residential address where you are currently living. ताकि अगर वो जहाँ आप अप्लाई कर रहे हैं, अगर आपको कुछ भेजना चाहते हैं, कोई कागज़ बाय पोस्ट आपको भेजना चाहते हैं, तो वो आपके पते पर ज़रूर पहुँच जाए. And then comes parents' occupation. Occupation is the profession that your parents have. Occupation वो काम है, वो जॉब है जो आपके पेरेंट्स करते हैं. और तो यहाँ पर आप पेरेंट्स ऑक्यूपेशन में मेंशन करेंगे कि आपके फादर या मदर क्या जॉब करते हैं. When we talk about professions, it is important that we know what professions people normally have, what work people normally do. हम सब की स्किल्स फ़र्क हैं, हम सब के काम फ़र्क हैं, हम सब की जॉब्स फ़र्क हैं. आपको इस यूनिट में ऐसी एक्सरसाइजेज भी मिलेंगी जहाँ you will need to talk about people and the types of work they do. Because as I said, we all do different jobs. So that makes all of us different professionals. We are professionals in different fields. और यही job, यही काम जो हम करना जानते हैं, this is called our occupation. Now here I have enlisted for you certain jobs. Journalist. Journalist is somebody who writes for newspapers and magazines or maybe news blogs is a journalist. Then there is a taxi driver. He is somebody who drives a taxi, a cab. Similarly, there is an architect who plans, designs and oversees the construction of buildings. There's a tailor who stitches clothes. Manager is somebody who is responsible for administering an organization. जो शख्स भी एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को एडमिनिस्टर करता है, उसके सिस्टम को संभालता है, साथ ही साथ वहाँ मौजूद स्टाफ के मसाइल को हल करता है, उनको देखता है, ऑर्गेनाइज करता है, वो मैनेजर होता है. टीचर इज समबडी हु टीचेस स्टूडेंट्स एंड डॉक्टर इज क्वालिफाइड टू ट्रीट पीपल हु आर इल. These are just few professions. There are many other professions that people work in, and there are many other occupations that keep people busy. So we all do all these kinds of things. Again, it is important because these professions define who we are. And when we talk about ourselves, whenever we talk to people, you must have seen people asking each other, आप क्या काम करते हैं? आप कहाँ जॉब करते हैं? What do you do? What is your job? What work do you do? So that kind of defines you. That is an important part of your introduction. So when you talk about yourself, you also talk about the work you do. एक अहम बात यह है कि जब आप लोगों को अपना प्रोफेशन बताएंगे, अपना ऑक्यूपेशन बताएंगे, तो ज़रूरी नहीं कि वो आपके प्रोफेशन और ऑक्यूपेशन से ऑलरेडी फेमिलियर हों. That is why you need to know those words and their specific terminology, and you need to know those things where you can introduce the work you do. आपको वो जुमले, वो वोकेबलरी आनी चाहिए कि जिनके ज़रिए आप लोगों को बता सकें कि आपके काम की नेचर क्या है, आप किस नौयत का काम करते हैं. So many times when you tell people about your profession, they ask you कि इस प्रोफेशन में क्या होता है, आप लोग एग्जैक्टली क्या करते हैं. So you must be able to tell what kind of work you do, what is the nature of your job. Dear students, ये थी आपकी यूनिट 1 where you are taught to talk about yourself. And while you talk about yourself, you must be able to answer. You must be able to answer the questions that are about you. Similarly, you must be able to ask other people similar questions to get to know them. You must be able to talk about the kind of profession and the work you do and the kind of profession other people have so that you are familiar with the kind of work they are doing. अपने बारे में बात करना कुछ मुश्किल लगता है. इसी तरह अपने बारे में लिखना भी कुछ मुश्किल लगता है. लेकिन अगर आपको ये तमाम चीज़ें याद रहें, ये तमाम लिस्ट जो हमने लिखी कि वो कौन कौन सी बातें हैं आपके बारे में जो आप कर सकते हैं, तो ये काम आसान हो जाएगा. आपकी यूनिट के अंदर कुछ ऐसे पैराग्राफ्स दिए गए हैं जहाँ पर आपको बताया गया है कि किसी के बारे में कैसे बात की जाती है, आप कैसे किसी की पर्सनैलिटी के ऊपर, किसी एक स्पेसिफिक पर्सन के ऊपर एक पैराग्राफ कैसे लिख सकते हैं. In the same fashion, you can write a paragraph on yourself. तो जब आप अपने ऊपर पैराग्राफ लिखेंगे उन्हीं लाइंस के ऊपर, the way the exercises are given in your unit, तो आप देखेंगे कि आपके लिए ये काम बहुत आसान हो जाएगा. इसके साथ ही मुझे इजाज़त दीजिए. शुक्रिया.